Afternoon, good morning for some. Welcome to Willis and Friends, our early relational health conversations. This is our second monthly series now, and I'm thrilled that you've joined us today. This series is designed to create conversations with inspiring people that I meet along the way of our journey about early relational health and about trying to continue to make visible the innovations, the movement, the scientific impacts, the meaningful impacts, what families are experiencing, what communities are experiencing as we're advancing this early relational health frame. So I'm eager to have the opportunity to share with you friends, colleagues, thought partners, and people that are really inspire me, that I know will also inspire you. So today I'm really most excited about two people that are here for a conversation with me about the power of two. The power of two, as I call it, early relational health healing and community building, is in New York. And I had the opportunity when I was at HRSA for home visiting early childhood systems work as the division director to meet Mary Dozier and Ann Heller. And I was keenly aware of the incredibly well-designed scientific basis of the ABC model, the Attachment and Biobehavioral Catch-up model, the parent coaching model. I was so deeply inspired by Mary Dozier's commitment to rigorous science, but also the demonstration of meaningful impacts for families. And I met Ann Heller through that process, who told me about the beginning good work in New York about taking the model into deep communities and then activating parent leaders as from the process of their experience of being a part of the ABC model and moving forward. And I met then in Newark, Delaware, with Mary Dozier and with Ann Heller for lunch, learning ever more about this amazing model. And that's what brings me now, today, to introduce to you Rasmus Monteciello and Yetonian Chestnut from Power of Two. Let me describe each of them first for you, give you a little bit of a bio, and then we'll get into our conversation. Rasmus is an African Latino activist, co-founder of the Power of Two. She holds a BA from St. John's University and an MPA from New York Robert Wagner Graduate School of Public Policy. She has 15 years of experience. Rasmus has been successfully established relationships with policymakers, community-based organizations, and social change groups to create partnerships and build support for programs serving historically marginalized populations in New York. Rasmus is a strong believer in the healing, informed practice, and approaches for all of her work, and keeps this framework constantly in mind. She is a 2019 Promise Ventures Fellow, a 2020 Aspen Healthy Communities Senior Fellow, and a 2021 New York University Steinhardt Senior Leaders Fellow. So Rasmus, it's phenomenal to have you with us. And then Yetonian Chestnut is a child care specialist and military veteran with more than 10 years of experience interacting, collaborating with multiple levels of management and diverse cultural audiences. During her time as a logistics specialist with the United States Army, Yetonian consistently achieved exceptional results while leading a team of 6 in a dynamic, fast-paced environment of both civilian and military capacities. Additionally, she worked in the educational system for more than 8 years. Yetonian is a graduate of the Power of Two ABC model in June of 2019 and has since served as a community ambassador in the 2020 cohort, and she's a mother of 3 beautiful boys. I'm delighted that Rasmus and Yetonian are with us today, and welcome to both of you. So to get us started, it would be great to hear from each of you as to, how did you come to be with Power of Two, and what inspires you today of being a part of this grand moment of time? Rasmus, you want to start?
Sure. Thank you so much, David, for having me and Yetonia in this conversation, and to your entire team at the Center for the Study of Social Policy for the important work that you all do. I am a Brownsville, Brooklyn native by way of Barahona in the Dominican Republic, 2 communities with a long history of strength and resilience, but also one of marginalization and trauma caused by colonization. But it wasn't until adulthood, when the confluence of the trauma that was already embedded in my biology and the stress from a challenging birthing experience, that I came to understand how that history was passed down to me and why it's important to decolonize parenting. And what I mean by that is helping Black, Latino, Indigenous, people of color break free from the dominant colonial European parenting framework that enforced strict discipline and fear as a mechanism of oppression, and that we, Black, Latino, and Indigenous people ourselves, began to utilize as part of our child rearing as a way to survive and protect our children during slavery, Jim Crow, and how we have attempted to survive the dehumanization of our bodies by law enforcement and other systems that take a punitive approach to interacting with families and that create barriers that perpetuate racist narratives. And so I come to this work with an abundance of pride in my community's strength and history, and with a fervent commitment to help my Black, Latino, Indigenous, and all people of color heal from the intergenerational trauma caused by our history of colonization and by existing systemic racism. I really want to help our communities develop confidence in our parenting ability and tap into what really just comes naturally to us, right? Which are social relationships, responsiveness, nurturance, collaboration, and community to really help us all not just survive, but really, truly thrive.
Wow. That's why we're talking, Rasmus, and I so love learning from you and with you. And thanks for getting us started. And Yetonia, how about you? What brings you to Power of Two, and what inspires you most?
What brought me to Power of Two is it felt like an extended family, and I felt welcome. I didn't feel pushed or forced, and I've always wanted to be the voice for the voiceless, and Power of Two definitely was that platform for me. It helped me to help my community. I'm born and raised Bronx native, and I know the struggles. I was a single mom, and I know how it is to not have anything to eat or not be able to afford certain benefits or qualities that you would like to have as a mom provided. So, but I've come out of that, and I can give both sides of the coin, from poverty to progress. So when you come from an environment where they say, "Oh, you don't matter," or "You don't exist," that's not true. Great things come from all over the place, and you could change the narrative for yourself. You don't have to believe the hype or the negative that comes out of our community. Sometimes you get a bad rep for your environment, but just like I said, it's progress in your community. Everybody has something great inside of them. Everyone has something to offer, and that's what Power of Two is: a union, a unity of greatness.
Wow. And I hear too, bringing voice to the voiceless. It just goes deep into my heart too. So welcome, Yetonia. So Erasma, how about if you share with us some of the history and the evolution of the Power of Two, and perhaps you can talk a bit about the ABC model too, for those that don't know about it, and give us some good thoughts about it.
Sure. Yetonia, first, thank you. I hear you and I see you, so thank you for sharing that. Power of Two is a homegrown community organization that was founded in New York City in 2015 to address the reality that oftentimes children born into historically marginalized communities, to families that have experienced intergenerational trauma, are often exposed to prolonged toxic stress that could negatively impact learning, behavior, and health across their lifespan. My partner, Ann Heller, and I recognize that some of the existing modalities in New York City were addressing the symptoms or manifestations of historical trauma rather than addressing the root causes, or they focus primarily on the individual without much attention to the foundational relationships, that of a parent and child, that could really help break the cycle of trauma. So we sought to identify an intervention that would allow us to support not just the individual parent or the individual child, but both, and by extension, the entire family. And that intervention is called Attachment and Biobehavioral Catch-up, ABC, which, as you said, David, was developed by Dr. Mary Dozier and her team at the University of Delaware, including Dr. Kristen Bernard, another co-founder of Power of Two. And ABC is a 10-week in-home parent coaching model that focuses on serve and return interactions as a way of helping to strengthen emotional bonds between caregivers and children and really build children's brain architecture. This can be as simple as parents responding sensitively when their baby is upset, or following a baby's lead and delighting in what they're doing. And so that back and forth caregiving like this is a building block for good life outcomes for the child, and has been proven to have long-term benefits for the parents as well. And the evidence supporting ABC's efficacy has been established through multiple large-scale randomized clinical trials that have focused on children and their parents who have been exposed to poverty and neglect. I'm sure that, David, you know this, but I want to share to those that are listening that the ABC intervention has earned the highest scientific rating by the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare. It is also federally recognized as an evidence-based maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting program. And so we believed in 2015 and have proven since then, in partnership with over 4,000 families in New York City, that ABC results in positive outcomes for New York City families when delivered through a community-driven and equity-centered approach. I want to repeat that: community-driven and equity-centered approach. And we have done so through deep engagement with our communities. And so our partnership with caregivers supports them in rebuilding confidence in their inherent parenting abilities, to develop a sense of belonging, and maximizes cultural pride as a way to buffer our children from the toxic stress of structural racism and tap what comes naturally to us, like I mentioned before: responsiveness and nurturance and ability to heal and strengthen relationships in order to raise healthy, liberated children and support long-term community cohesion.
Wow, Rasmus, I see you, I hear you. I'm so delighted. 4,000 families.
That's right.
Strong, deep evidence of impact, but most importantly, community-driven and equity-driven.
That's right.
It really sings deeply to me in our work in early relational health with partnering deep with communities. So thank you. And Yetonia, how about for you? If you'd be comfortable sharing with us how you came to participate with Power of Two, and also the experience you had, and then how that moves in you then becoming a community ambassador and the work that you now do. That would be great.
How I came about was at my son's daycare. It was offered. A lot of parents just, passed on by. They didn't really stop to pay attention what was being said. And then, I took a minute, I listened in, and it said something about free. And I said, okay, free, I like that. And it said 10 weeks, and it was parent and child classes. And I said, oh, okay, this sounds good. So once I got like a little gist of what the program was all about, I said, oh, this is something I definitely wanted to hear and wanted to be involved in. My son at the time, he really wasn't speaking. Because his daycare, they use sign language. He was mostly using sign language. He wasn't using as much words. So I had some concerns and some things that needed to be worked out. And I have a big gap in my children's ages. So it was like I was learning all over again. And each child is definitely different. So I needed to focus on him and find out new ways and new techniques to help me navigate through this thing called parenthood all over again. And Power of Two was just that. They came to my home. We met with one of our great representatives, and she gave us different things, and it was taking the lead that really stuck out to me. As a parent, I mostly do everything, and it was a class that we had where my son had to make pudding, and I could not help him. He had to do it on his own. And just to hear, like, I had to lead him with just words and let him take the lead. And just to see this 1-year-old child just doing everything, mixing and pouring and, not making a mess and cleaning up behind himself. It was just like amazing, because I'm like, well, we do all of this. And sometimes that just can't take the lead. They see this, they model your behavior. And that was like an awesome experience. And I never experienced that with my other two. I always did everything. But just to see how he delighted in himself, he was proud of himself. And then at the end, he had to enjoy the pudding. So something as simple as that, when you have a new technique or a new way of doing things, it just brings so much light to the parent and to the child. And the navigation is amazing to see the progress from him not speaking to him speaking a lot, to him being proud of himself, say, Mommy, did I do this right? Or did I do this right? And that delight, you have delight in yourself as a parent, and then a delight in your child, because it's a mirror. You're reflecting what you feel, and the child feels that as well. And how I became a parent ambassador, when they called me, I just jumped right on it. I felt welcome. I felt that Power 2 was just my home. And I know, like, after the 10 weeks, I just didn't want it to end. I was like, oh no. So I knew that the experience that I felt, I wanted parents that were in my community to learn the same thing and to experience that same joy and that same pride that I had. And everywhere I go, I talk about Power 2, and I try to get parents involved with their children and just to learn new ways and new things, because even though we face a lot of stressors in life, it's still joy within the midst of that. And that's what really brought me there.
My gosh, Yetonian, there's so much. First of all, I have a little tear in my eye, so thank you for sharing. That's always means you're hitting my heart. And then also when Rasmus, when I'm hearing the birdies singing in the background, I know we're talking about something far bigger than ourselves. So, but Yetonian, I want to ask you a couple of things, if I might. One is, what was in your home the experience of the ABC model? What actually happened? And what was it that really caught you, that was so meaningful to you, of because it's a home visiting model, right?
Yes, it is.
What was that experience in your case?
From the beginning to the end, each week is a different lesson. So you get to, like, they teach you vignettes or different modeling mechanisms. So I can't remember the first week because it was so long ago. He's
Sure.
4 years old now. But some of the things that stuck out to me were like how to, like, if your child is upset, how to de-escalate that situation. Just like I explained about the pudding, we had that event. Playing with the toys and letting them know, oh, that's a good job. Or if they get upset or they need help with something, letting them do it on their own and then come to you and ask you for help. Not just going and be a helicopter mom and help them out. So it was just different experiences like that it was good from the beginning to the end. And every week it was needed. Every moment of it was needed. And just to the program, the parent coordinator, to have someone to delight in you as a parent, you don't often hear that. So that in itself is a confidence booster. And when you hear someone say, oh, that's a good job, Mom, that puts a little pat on your back. And then now you're able to reflect that to your child and reflect that to your other children. I have 2 other kids that they wanted to be involved. They wanted to help. They wanted to make pudding too. They wanted to get on the floor and play with toys. So it became a family thing. And they weren't excluded, even though the visit is for Jonah. They were definitely included. And that's what I loved about it. The whole family could get involved. It's not only for you and the child, but it's for everyone.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. Is videotaping utilized? Was videotaping in your experience?
Yes, it was. At first, I was like a little apprehensive about it because you're like, oh, now you got to clean up and now you got to do this, and and just as a normal parent, like especially with small children, the house is not always as tidy as you would like it to be, and but then like after a while, because of comfortability, I forgot the cameras were even there, honestly. And at the end, they give you like a USB of your experience, like a little video, and you see from the beginning to the end of everything you did, and you're like, oh my God, this is so amazing. And you forgot like the camera caught these things with you and your child, and just to see those moments played back in this as a keepsake. So I really enjoyed that. So I think like when I explained it to other parents who feel a little apprehensive about being watched, I
Yeah,
explained to them it's really not even nothing to be concerned about, because we're not watching you to see if you're doing anything wrong. It's just a guidance, so just ignore the camera and be yourself. And I tell them I experienced it, I went through it, it was okay for me, so it'll be okay for you. And I think having that personal touch with another parent and explaining that helps them to ease that apprehensive about being recorded, because
yeah,
you really forget it's there once you involved in your child and the coordinator is there. You forget the camera's there.
yeah. And Rasmus, remind me, how is the video utilized in the model? I'm curious about that too.
Sure. So, Yetonia, thank you. And I just want to say that a few months ago, we had a graduation, a community ambassador graduation, where all of the community ambassadors received certificates. And it was so wonderful to see Yetonia there with her mom and with her 3 boys, Devin, Eric, and Jonah. And they were just so wonderful and so expressive. And, you could see that they were already hitting all of the different milestones, and at their age. So it was really wonderful. So kudos to you, Mom. Wonderful job. So yes, so the videotaping, and Yetonia is right that, there's sometimes an apprehension related to the videos, because, our community has a long history of surveillance, of being surveilled, of being policed, right? As it relates to child welfare, but also, law enforcement. And so, one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we did off the bat when we were having our community conversations was to say, we video record all of these sessions, and we do it for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is because we're here to celebrate you as a parent, as a caregiver. We don't want to call out any moments in which you may not have been doing the right thing. We want to emphasize and focus on celebrating what you're doing well. And so those videos serve as an opportunity to reflect on all of the wonderful things that you were doing well, but also seeing for yourself which are the specific areas in which you need to further develop, right? So the parent coach isn't telling you, you're seeing it for yourself. So it's almost like engaging in reflective practice for the parent, right? It's an opportunity to really see. And as Yetonia said, that you see that over time, like how much growth you have experienced as a parent, but also your children, which is really powerful. The second reason we do that is because, unlike a lot of, what we hear in society and in the work of early childhood, it's not a one size fits all, right? And not all parents struggle with the same things. There's some parents that come to us that are incredibly nurturing, that are incredibly responsive, but, they, for whatever reason, aren't good at following the lead, right? Because all they think about is, I need to make sure that my child can read by the time they get to kindergarten. We know, as parents now, that that's not necessarily the case, right? That just by conversation and interaction, they develop, the tools and the language to be able to, identify words and sounds, etc. But our parents sometimes don't know that, right? Because there has been such a long-term emphasis on they need to be ready for school. What does school readiness look like? And so what happens is that, the opportunity to review the video with an ABC supervisor can help a parent coach conceptualize what are the specific strengths that we see in the parent, and what are the specific areas that they may need a little bit more encouraging and support. It may not be nurturing, but it may be following the lead, or they can be great at nurturing and following the lead, but they're still struggling with threatening language and behavior, right? So let's figure out how to help them do that. And then the third reason we do the videotaping It's because we want to ensure that we're helping the parent and the family the best way that we can. And so we want to make sure that we're focusing on fidelity to the model, right? So there are 3 targets that are consistent to the model, which are nurturance, following the child's lead and delighting, as well as diminishing frightening behavior. So we want to make sure that our parent coaches are identifying the targets, are then commenting on those targets, because that's what we know that really helps to change behavior. And then we want to make sure that they're connecting it to an outcome. So it's not just saying, hey, mom, dad, you're doing a good job, but oh my gosh, the fact that, baby walked over and gave you a blue card, but called it a yellow card, you didn't correct him in that moment. That's wonderful. You're following his lead. And so you're building your child's confidence. And so making those connections really helps to ensure that, the parent and the child have a trusting relationships, that the child starts to develop confidence and understands that, sure, okay, I'll make mistakes, but doesn't matter. My parent is going to be there. And there's a 4th reason that I want to mention why we also do the videotaping. As Yetonia mentioned, we want to make sure that parents in those moments of stress, right? Because I'm a parent of 2 and I have those moments of stress, that you can always go back to that video montage of all of your sessions, and you can see for yourself the tremendous progress you have made and reconnect to the reasons why you engage in the program, right? So it's a motivational tool as well.
That's phenomenal. We've been thinking a lot in our other networks of thought leaders and innovators around the power of video in terms of advancing early relational health, and mindful of the vulnerabilities that can sometimes be sensed that videoing is surveillance and judgment, whereas the sense of celebrating, delighting, growing together, advancing, and the like becomes really important. And I'm struck, Antonia, I'm sure you have to convey that kind of trust and opportunity to families as you explain the Power of 2 model. I'm really curious, how do you approach talking to a new family about this opportunity? I mean, you meet somebody new, or how does that happen? How do you convey an opportunity as an ambassador to others? What do you say?
Most of the time it's just in conversation. I'm at the park or on the train, or so I don't know. I just have like a knack for just meeting new people and cool parents. And so I say, hey, I have this program, and I talk about it just like that. It's easy for me. It's natural because it's something that I enjoy. And once I see that parent is interacting with their child a certain way, I know that parent would enjoy it as well. And I had about maybe 5 parents that I just spoke to, like that I met on the street, that actually said they went to Power of 2 and they enjoyed the program. So just being a voice to someone who doesn't even know about it. And a lot of people just don't know about Power of 2. And it's an amazing program. It's free. It's nothing that they have to pay for, because something like this, most people will have to pay a lot of money for. And they really just jump on it. So it's just in conversation, basic conversation. There's nothing fancy. It's not scripted. It's just a natural conversation.
No, I'm sure it comes right from your heart and from your smile and from your experience. And how do you make visible that someone's coming to your home to help you?
I let them know how the model is right away. I tell them it's 10 weeks. It's a home. Well, because of COVID, it's sometimes virtual at now. But most people feel okay, because sometimes the only visitors they have is the kids. And so is to have somebody come over is like an enjoyment, like they have to prepare for that person, or they know that this person is coming to visit them. And oftentimes the parent coach, they bring toys or books or different things out for the session. So that's fun as well. So it's they do get perks out of it. And I think that always helps, because who doesn't love gifts or free things, so and that's what I explain. I explain that if they need other help, like personal, like housing and supplies for the baby, formula, real life things that the parent coach is able to help them with those type of things. And most of the time, those people who are afraid to go to like welfare or to those other programs who kind of like look down on them, they will feel more comfortable to let the parent coach know exactly what they need, and they get the help that they need in a timely fashion.
Yeah, phenomenal. Rasmus, we've all gone through this awful, awful period of COVID. At the same time, the racial justice reckoning that's elevating in importance in every level in our community. And you and I have talked a lot about the importance of these foundational relationships, breaking generational trauma. How do you think now about the importance of these foundational relationships in this post-COVID Building Back Better moment, and about the social justice movement and how the good work of Power of Two and communities and ambassadors come together for envisioning a new way for our next generation of families, especially those that have been so marginalized for so long? What are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, for starters, we know that the COVID-19 pandemic put our relationships to the test. And for many families, the pandemic detrimentally affected almost every aspect of their daily lives. The disruption to the economic safety nets on which many rely created additional stressors that, coupled with fear, social isolation, lack of quality health and mental health services, lack of access to technological infrastructure needed to navigate like teleworking or at-home schooling, in addition to just the fear of illness or death and how to keep themselves and their family safe, was in many ways incredibly devastating. But what I can say is that, once again, our families showed incredible strength, resourcefulness, and resilience that really characterizes our, Black, Latino, and Indigenous history in so many ways in order to navigate the pandemic, which, by the way, is still raging in some parts of our communities, right? And so we have seen how our families maximize the positive effects of responsive parenting to buffer their children from the stressors posed by the pandemic, and have harnessed the power of their voice in collaboration with us and other homegrown organizations to advocate for much needed resources, including, PPE, technology, food, and baby essentials like diapers and clothing. And so, as devastating as the pandemic has been for our families, we are witness to how healthy familial relationships serve as the root from which parents are then able to branch out to really co-create conditions for children's healthy development, for their own restorative parental well-being, and also to plant the seeds for community cohesion and community action. And so, in terms of where we are with the Build Back Better, I think that there's some wonderful opportunities related to that. But I do have, lots of concerns related to its implementation.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are many that we could. You want to share a few of the concerns you have?
Sure. So, what we're seeing here is that, our representatives and governments have, over the past, 60 years, failed to invest in families until recently with the Biden-Harris administration's ARPA, right? So the American Rescue Plan Act and Build Back Better, which to me is a very progressive step forward for babies and families across the nation. And, for many of us, particularly those of us in communities of color, we are heartened by the Build Back Better's potential influx of capital to help address racial disparities, and how those funds could potentially address the long legacy of harm in our communities. Yeah. And I can tell you that, in New York City, for example, just this past June, the city council and Mayor Bill de Blasio agreed on a $98.7 billion budget for the city fiscal year 2022. That is the largest budget in New York City history. This budget makes use of about $14 billion in federal aid that could be a game changer for families and children in our communities. And this includes approximately $32 million in emergency food distribution, $140 million for behavioral health supports, $600 million to achieve 100% of fair student funding for every school, and the list goes on. However, I am very often up at night worrying about how some of these very institutions that have caused such extraordinary harm to our communities could be trusted to administer the level of support that is needed to make our communities whole. And so in order for these funds and these resources to lift all boats, policymakers at the city, at the state level must collaborate directly with communities. And when I say communities, I mean families and local partners, to learn about the barriers to access, to work together to dismantle those barriers, and to build joint mechanisms that allow for rigorous monitoring of resource allocation and program implementation.
So does Power of Two and your ambassadors and the multiple sites now that you have within New York, are they increasingly visible to make this case and also be the receiver of some of the dollars in terms of supporting families and having families know resources that are available to them and should be available to them?
So we are now more actively, more so than ever before, have created a platform that allows us to really amplify the voices, of our community, including our community ambassadors, right? And maximizing this opportunity in a way that gives us direct access to those elected officials through, coalition building, through partnerships with other advocacy organizations, but also coordinating. We actually coordinated our first mayoral forum, a few months ago, to really push the family and child agenda, to be front and center and give all of our families an opportunity to send in and ask direct questions of these candidates about how is it that you're going to invest in children? How are you going to ensure that these agencies are accountable? How can we hold you to task when you don't? And it was incredibly powerful. And so these are the ways in which we are co-creating movement, a really profound movement with community to really advocate for long-term change.
That gets me just inspired, because much of what we've been experiencing with our early relational health movement is bringing voice to the voiceless, bringing that sense of the next generation opportunity, and also making visible the disparities and the barriers and the historical traumas that have disrupted the strengths and resiliencies for all families, and to try to then create the activism necessary for the next generation of families and community healing. And that's why I'm likewise so inspired by the Power of Two and about the work of your family ambassadors. But it's really part of healing and recovery and rebuilding, as well as probably reparations to the supports that are desperately needed for our communities that have otherwise forever suffered. And Yetonia, have you had a chance to raise your voice or the voice of others to those of power?
Yes, I have. I was a part of that forum with the mayors. I got to say some questions that I had, and some of them tiptoed around the answer and then really give us a straight, direct answer. And some gave us a good answer, who is our candidate anyway, who's in the lead and win. And so you see the true intentions of people that's running for you. And sometimes there's a lot of hype, and they really are not for us, or they don't have our better interests. But sometimes we see there are some good ones out there that can drive force what we need with the reparations and extra help for our community and things that we have needed for a very long time. And Build Back Better is building back now. That's what it should be
Yeah.
called, building back
Build
now.
Back Now.
Yes, and it starts within the home and within the community, and after that, it could be like a trickle effect. It leads to bigger and better, and those people become better citizens and better community advocates and ambassadors, and those children become leaders, and that's how it goes on. So it starts at home, and from there, the home has to be the structure and the foundation, and then from there on, you can build up.
The peer-to-peer connecting and building a movement in a community from one home to other homes and families to larger communities. Rasmus, how do you think about Power of Two being a community movement in terms of next generational opportunity, those foundational relationships, generational, next generation building capacity, healing trauma? Talk to me about community building and this foundational relationship movement that's captured within Power of Two. How do you think about that?
Sure. The way I see it is that the strong and healthy relationships between parents and children is what really sets the stage for healthier overall familial relationships, as well as I mentioned before, community cohesion and community action. And it was our direct services programming and our trusted partner relationships that served as the impetus for our Community Ambassador Initiative, which really fosters racial consciousness and builds on those social relationships framework to advance advocacy and create opportunities for families to reclaim and exercise their power and agency. Parents who speak directly from, a vantage of lived experience are themselves identifying and co-creating hyperlocal solutions that address, the current and historical issues limiting the healthy development of children, families, and the communities in which they live. It is, as I see it, a result of their collective voices that we have begun the work of creating an early relational health model that would strengthen relationships with local health services, perinatal service providers, childcare and early education providers, with the ultimate goal of improving our community's overall well-being and really dismantle oppressive systems.
Yeah, I think a lot about how important it is to, from a family standpoint, to start this work really early, certainly prenatally and in those first 1,000 days, because the trajectories and the patterns get established so very early. And I wonder how both of you think about, by your experiences, why it matters that we focus so early in the community building and the recovery and the resiliency building. From your own vantage point, I mean, from the scientific view, we think prenatal and first 1,000 days really matter, of course, to set the trajectory of health and development. But there's another element that has to do with hope and possibility from a family's experience that gets set early. And I'm wondering if you could speak to how, from your view, why focusing early really matters, like ABC does, or like the engagement of families in the earliest period. What are your thoughts about that? Why early would matter?
For me, I know that the earlier the better, because if sometimes a lot of things that is faced by the parents are habits that they learn behaviors are not always right. But if you don't know any better, you can't do better. So if we catch them before they have the baby, they have those things in the bag. They have those techniques. They have the skills. They have the knowledge, and they can change. They can break generational curses. They can be the first to not hit their children or to guide their children and direct their children. So those 1,000 days, prenatal care, that matters because you're catching it before a problem can even arise. You're catching them at the peak. You're catching them at the beginning. And that's what you need. That's what you want. You want them when they're seeking, they're hopeful, and they're ready to follow. So if you have the willingness, that's all you need. And then from there, they have the guidance. And that's what Power of Two is, the guidance to lead them through. The parent in Power Two is the bridge. And the bridge is over with the success. And that's what you want.
I always think during pregnancy and around the time of the birth of a baby is a huge opportunity of healing and opportunity. And then unfortunately, that doesn't always happen, especially if there's oppression or a threat. And Rasmus, that heralds back to, in your opening remarks, you mentioned decolonizing parenting. And I wonder if you could talk more about that. It's not a term I've heard before, and I'd like to hear more of that element of how, of why it is that the Power of Two and the racial justice movement and this movement is so much about decolonizing parenting practices to let the beauty of human capacity grow. Talk to me about that.
Sure. So, I recognize that it's not a term that, is readily used in conversations, but it's something that we have certainly seen and observed in a variety of different communities, that we have borrowed some maladaptive, we have developed some maladaptive behaviors because of the tools that our oppressors used during the time of slavery, right? Those tools that were oppressive and those tools that were controlling. And so we have been, like I mentioned, implementing this as part of our child rearing, and for fear, right? For fear of losing our children, for fear of, the harsh world out there, and not recognizing that we and ourselves are inciting violence on our children, right? That those maladaptive behaviors really chip away at those trusting relationships that are really critical. Not just within the first 1,000 days, but for a lifetime. And it really negatively impacts our children's and our own ability to establish really lasting and healthy, social relationships. And so, for us, it's about recognizing the role that slavery has played in our parenting. It's really looking at post-traumatic, slave syndrome and saying, wow, this really has impacted the way we have, taken care of our children, how we raise our families, and how we navigate the world, and the messages that we give to our children about, how they must engage with the world. Right. That's always fear-based and very protective. And, and so we want to bring our families back. We want to bring them away from that. We want to, to develop hope, as Yetonia, so eloquently said. We want to make sure that there's pride in our culture, in the positive aspects of our history, but also in the negative aspects of our history, because there are lessons to be learned from all of that, and bringing those all together is justice. That is what justice looks like. Being honest and authentic and collaborative, and finding solutions to the issues that have for so long, oppressed us. And so, to me, it's important that we rebuild the fabric within the family unit, because then that is going to help inform what the community looks like. And then that's going to help shape, what kind of policies are really going to benefit us, not just a few, but all of us.
Yep. Wow. That's what so many of our hopes, that the early relational health moment, partnering with racial justice and equity, can come together in terms of healing and recovery and rebuilding. And the beauty starts to come through that's carried by families. that becomes visible. And Yetonia, your thoughts about what the decolonizing parenting, I mean, you've gone through the ABC experience and now you're its ambassador. What are your thoughts in this place about the parenting experiences and change?
I can definitely see I'm a part of the change. I'm a part of the fabric of the change. I was raised in a single parent home by my grandmother. She was from the South, so a lot of her methods were like strict, or, you know, not really. I really didn't get hit any that much, but I know that they believe in that. And even like when I was raising my children, and my grandmother say, "You do a lot of talking, you know, just beat their behind," and things like that. Those are, you say, Mom, that's not going to help. So sometimes we have to retrain our family and retrain our friends. But because that's all they knew, it was survival. So they're not wrong for how they feel. They're not wrong for the way they think. That's how they survive. But now with our new training and our knowledge, we have to retrain them. And that is how the growth happens. That's how the change happens, and that's how the strength happens. And it's just a new way. So colonizing is, we just have to have a new way of thinking, and
So
a new way of teaching.
I hear you, and thereby, do you find people around you hearing your message?
Sometimes I have resistance for people that set in their ways, or they believe that that's the only way and that's right. Then sometimes I do have people who didn't see in my way. They start to see in my way. So I think it's all in how the proof is in the pudding, if I could put it that way. I raised my children. They see, and my sons are, they have ADHD, but they're well behaved. They they're man and well mannered. So it's right there. The evidence is right there. I don't have to hit them. I don't have to yell. I don't have to act like a crazy woman to get the results that I need. And if they see those, if you model the right behavior or the behavior that you want, you can get those results from your children. And that's all that matters. You have to be a model of the type of energy or the type of behavior you want to see. So.
Yeah, and as people witness that, the beauty of that kind of strengths and delight that you share and others can see, it speaks volumes. And also, as you say, brings voice to the voicelessness. It brings clarity to what could really be new and different. So Rasmus, how can we help you? And we have a coordinating center at CSSP focused on early relational health and making visible not only child health transformation, but also community transformation. In our community work, we think a lot about quote unquote all-in strategies, meaning, the leadership of families, the tables of multiple programs and leaders in early childhood systems that recognize that a relational health framing really matters. And certainly Power of Two as a model, but more than that, the ambassador, and more than that, the messaging is really big and sings loudly what we believe in terms of advancing a relational health frame. What are your thoughts about what other communities could do with you, or how do you think about how your work or others could spread, or how we could help you in your work?
Sure. Thanks, David, for asking that. I would say that what we are doing right now in this moment, you, Yetonia, and I engaging in this honest and authentic conversation, and from diverse entry points, right? But we're all aligned on purpose.
Yeah.
Is incredibly powerful and important. And so to me, the first step is creating more opportunities in which different partnerships like ours can share with and learn from each other. A community of practice, if you will, would really help to further promote, the power of early relational health. And when I think about organizations, or the organizations that are looking to do this work, and, potentially other evidence-based models and researchers that are hoping to engage in community, I would like to say that it's important not to shy away from the true history of our nation. And and how it was built and the impact that, post-traumatic slave syndrome and existing, racist systems and policies has on our communities, right? And, I would like to encourage all of those folks seeking to promote parent leadership to really be explicit and intentional about weaving a racial equity lens at all levels of your organizations, including using that lens to re-examine the framework that you use for research, to determine the composition of your team, to inform your organization's core values and culture, the framing of the conversations that you engage in with families and communities, and committing to regularly evaluating if anything that you are doing is causing harm. And always, always, always recentering the fulcrum that reminds you that, lived experience is a true expertise that must be valued.
Absolutely. And we believe with all of our early relational health work that engaging parent leadership, lived experience, and partnering at the tables and decision-making together, sharing power, but also learning together, because this is a journey of learning. And so many of our systems at every level, have not listened to the family experience or even considered, its anti-racist and its bias and its racist structures that have created so many of our challenges. So we're all in a learning journey together. And Yetonian, I'm curious as to how did participating in the ABC model elevate your voice? How did that bring forth for your experience the way to ever further elevate the voice of possibility? What are your thoughts?
It definitely elevated my voice. It actually helped me to see clearer and to see a lot more great things that happen in my community. Because even though I experienced some great things, I still had my own biases from growing up in that type of environment and that type of community, and to see so much potential and so many great events coming out of Brooklyn and coming out of the Bronx, and like, oh, we have this, so you get a sense of pride and you get a sense of confidence. So that's what I'm experiencing now at health, and I'm learning in the process as well. As a parent and ambassador, I got to learn some things about myself that I really didn't know about, and with our training that we had. So sometimes it starts within yourself, because you're trying to help your children, but you need to work on the me first, and then if the me is good, you can work on the them. And that's what Power 2 helps to cultivate that. It helps to shape that. And it has opened my eyes to see a lot more, and I'm willing to learn more. And this is not the end. This is definitely the beginning for me.
So the discovery of delight, hope, and potential with you and your family then starts to have a ripple with other families that you touch, and
Yes,
becomes
it
a
does.
part of a movement in a neighborhood. And then Erasmus allows it to start pushing hard on the policy levers, and also making visible with clear joy
That's right.
the potential of a new way of our communities being and experiencing themselves. It's hard to imagine. We've been almost talking for an hour,
Oh, wow.
and such a delight to learn from, to be with you, to learn from you, to hear your hearts, to hear your truths, and to share with our audience. And I'm sure there'll be others that'll listen on further. I encourage people to contact Power of Two, Rasmus. I hope we can keep our conversations going forward as our relational health work deep within our communities. I'm talking more and more about the Power of Two being, an anchor as a way of engaging authentic conversations and community building and ambassador development. We can certainly continue to keep these conversations moving forward. Any final comments you want to make before we need to close here in about another minute? Final comments, Erasmus, Yetonian? Final comments?
Just thank you for this opportunity, and just be the voice of change and
Thanks.
create a wave.
Rasmus?
Yes, thank you, David. Yetonia, thank you for just being you, and the way that you approach this conversation, and the way you just lead and guide us. And to all of you listening, this is an opportunity for us in this moment in time to freedom dream together. So let's dream and let's create, make sure that those dreams become reality, and really let's lift all boats.
Phenomenal. Yes. And we need to come to a close for this month's Willis and Friends and What Dear Friends we have here. And let me encourage you to join us next month on August 18th. There'll be a change of time. It will in fact be 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And I'll be delighted that Andy Garner and Lee Beers of the American Academy will be talking about the policy statement. The new policy statement released by the AAP that's actually focused on preventing toxic stress, partnering with families and communities to advance relational health. This is a really big deal. And so, again, thanks to my two guests today, and be well. Bye-bye.